Hey, hello and good afternoon, everybody. I am Risha from Bayside Council. Thank you for joining us today for the Talking Bayside webinar. And before we start, I would like to do the acknowledgement of the country. Bayside Council acknowledges the traditional custodians, the Gadigal and the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. The people of the Eora Nation, their spirits and the ancestors will always remain with our waterways and the land, our Mother Earth. And I would like to pay my respect to anyone joining us today virtually as well. Okay, so as you all might know, the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence is an annual campaign, and we are towards the end of it. It started on the 25th of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and runs through the International Human Rights Day on the 10th of December, which is today is 8 already. So Bayside Council has been committed and has been organizing a lot of events and activities to support the campaign. And if you want to know more about the events that we have done and to check more of our social media campaigns and everything, please visit our website and also our Facebook page and other social media platforms as well. Okay, so before I introduce our special presenters here today, I just want to share some general housekeeping. As you know, this is a virtual platform. I really encourage you all to mute yourself. And if you have any questions, please hold your questions until the end, as we will have a Q&A sessions after the formal presentation is done. But you can always put your questions on the chat box on the right-hand side as well, and we will go through the questions towards the end. And we are recording this session. The reason is because not all of us could join us, and it's the lunchtime, and so if people want to revisit it, it will be recorded and it will be uploaded on our Bayside Council YouTube channel, and we will share it on our social media again. However, I want to give that confidence to everybody that the Q&A part will not be recorded, and then we really encourage you all to ask questions to our presenters, and we are respecting the privacy and everything. So just let us know if you have any questions around that as well. And the most important bit is, as we unpack the domestic violence, consent, and the healthy relationship and the positive relationship throughout the presentation, it might be confronting to someone. So please make sure you take a step back and reach out to us if you want to have a chat. So I will be here available as well. So yeah. Okay, without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter, Lara and William. And thank you so much, Lara and William, for joining us today. They are a fantastic youth worker who has been delivering Love Buys, the Positive Relationship Program, for ages. And they work with the young people and talk about all the positive relationship. And the most important bit, I think, that's where it starts, having those conversations about the relationship, having those conversations about the consent and what is a healthy relationship and what is an unhealthy relationship. So without further ado, I would like to pass it on to you, Lara and William.
Thanks, Risha. Hi, everyone. My name's Lara. I am a youth worker with the Shack Youth Services / Benevolent Society, and with me is my awesome co-worker, William, who is also a youth worker, and together we run programs like Love Bites, along with other programs with that relate to protective behaviours, transitional reports. We also do drop-ins and many other programs. I'd just like to also begin today on acknowledging the traditional custodians and on the land that we meet, and we pay my respects to their elders past and present. So today we're going to talk a bit about Love Bites and what we teach the young people through a fun interactive day. It does get quite serious in parts, but we try to create a safe space for them that they can have fun and will take away things at the end of the day. So what is Love Bites? Love Bites is a respectful relationship educational program that is facilitated to schools by youth workers. Love Bites is, there's two programs. There's a senior and a junior. So the senior is 15 to 17 years old, so that's year 10. And the junior one is 11 to 14-year-olds. So that could be like year 6 to year 8. It's a whole day approach. We run a whole day approach, and it's divided up into 3 sessions. The first session is relationship violence. The second session is sex and relationship. And then the third bit of the day is a creative session where we ask the young people, they can either create a piece of artwork or do a rap that is relating back to the day. So we often get artworks that have, no consent, must have consent, or there'd be pictures of violence, and it's quite amazing to see that in that like half an hour, some of the artworks that these young people present is amazing. Also with the rap, it's the rapping session, what the songs they come out with is just, it's really fulfilling to see what they've learnt throughout the day and what they can take home with them. Love Bite aims to give young people an understanding and awareness of relationship violence and sexual assault. It provides young people with strategies on how to manage concerns early on in their relationships, how to support their friends in their relationships, and most importantly, to highlight that they can make choices around their behaviour. We also now focus on not just boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. We talk about, it could be like a student-teacher relationship. It could be a parent-child relationship. So it's not just inclusive of a love relationship. Love Bites is now also made the LGBTIQA+ included in the content as well. Will.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lara. So that's the introduction to our Love Bites, not our Love Bites course, but the Love Bites program. And to get it started, our first activity is a crossing the line style activity. So we have a spectrum that we line up in the classroom with just a piece of tape, and then we put answers of agree, disagree, or maybe or not entirely sure. And then we'll ask the students a line of questioning that relates to whatever content we're covering at any one moment, because this activity is just a specific medium that we use to discuss whatever topic is happening at that exact time. But we'll repeat that throughout the session with different topics that range from consent to healthy relationships and everything. So when we get them to line up when we ask them the question, and sometimes there'll be questions like, is it all right for me to want to know where my boyfriend or girlfriend is all the time? And naturally they'll go to whichever side that they choose to answer to. Sometimes we'll get a pretty even spread for some questions, and then sometimes we won't. The most important thing for us as facilitators is to not go in with an opinion or any kind of pre-established opinion that we're trying to force on them. We kind of just want and that can be said for the entire program. We want the entire environment to be one big open discussion where everyone feels comfortable contributing, so that if someone does have an opinion or does have ideas that differ to maybe what everyone else in the classroom is thinking is accepted behavior, then they feel comfortable sharing that. And then once that's done, it's a comfortable environment for us to break down why they have that opinion or why they have that idea. And so we can unpack everything at once. So we'll get them lined up on a spectrum. And instead of picking and choosing people's answers as well, just because we don't want to have people feel singled out for whatever their answers are, to again, try to accommodate that holistic environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing. We'll kind of phrase it in the sense of, oh, if someone was on this side of the spectrum and did think that it was okay to check in constantly with your significant other to find out where they are, why would they think that? And we try to challenge, and even if they had voted for the other end of that spectrum, we try to get the answers from them so that they can understand what the train of thought and what the mindset of people who are lined up all along that spectrum would be. Because once they have a more holistic understanding of the question and the content that question contains, they can then be more confident in their own answer. So, and it really helps challenge a lot of preconceived things that they have as well. So we'll talk to them about, oh, well, maybe in the right context, you're just checking in on your partner to see if they're safe for it. But at the same time, you also need to understand that they're allowed their own boundaries and that you're not allowed to be constantly checking in on them, and you don't have a personal right to know where they are. They have the right to withhold that information from you as well. And that's just kind of a touch up of the kind of discussions that we'll have in relation to those questions. So again, it's very open. We try not to be opinionated about it and make people feel bad for what their selections are at any one time. And we try to make sure that the students reflect that as well, making sure that they're not making other students in the class feel uncomfortable for picking other things. And then we kind of rotate through different questions and we unpack each question as we go, exploring all the different answers to it and why people would answer that question in that way. And then once we're all on the same page, they start to kind of understand why people are choosing certain answers, and then they can understand what their true answer to the question was. Because sometimes they make an opinion off of very little information, because we asked them the question and we asked them to pick their answer almost immediately. We give them about 3 seconds and just tell them to go to their side. So they're just going off of whatever experience they have in relation to that question previously. But once we unpack it a bit more, maybe they start to shift around and there's a bit of movement, and that's always interesting to see as well. So that's one of the main activities that we use to facilitate a lot of these discussions around the topics that we cover throughout. Just seeing if I've missed anything there. I don't think I have. Yeah, so it's a pretty good method. Make sure that everyone feels comfortable contributing, and it really helps us unpack those issues there. We then move on, after we've done some activities in relation to that, we move on to a story about a young 15-year-old girl, I believe she was, 14-year-old girl called Angela Barker. So some people here may have even heard of this issue when it was at its peak about in 2004, if anyone has a memory that spans back to then. I certainly don't. But it was all over the news at the time, and it was a 14-year-old young lady called Angela Barker who unfortunately was hospitalized due to a very, very abusive relationship with her 18-year-old partner. And there was a documentary that was made about it, and that's a documentary that we play for the classes. So it can be quite confronting, and we do make sure to prepare all the students for that content, letting them know that it can be quite full on, and that occasionally there are issues, and we try to establish with them that if they feel uncomfortable at any time and they feel like they need a break, that they can feel free to leave the classroom whenever they need to for a fresh breath of air. But we watch the video initially, and then we unpack a lot of things that happened in this. We unpack a lot of things that happened throughout the story of Angela and her boyfriend Dale. So we start off identifying that it looked like a pretty healthy relationship to begin with. They loved each other. Maybe they were around each other a little bit too much, and some of her friends detailed at some points that their love could be described as an obsession. So that was kind of a first little sign that maybe their relationship wasn't built on the most healthy boundaries, and that they were relying on each other a bit too much with that love sense, and they were infatuated with each other. There was that obsession, and with that obsession comes control a little bit. So we start to see the signs of an abusive relationship start to trend upwards throughout the story as well. So it does start off pretty timid, and you can accept that it's a normal relationship, but then there's certain behaviors and activities that happen. So Dale yells at her a few times, and Dale tries to gaslight her into thinking that her family doesn't like him for for nefarious reasons or whatever, and there's very clear evidence that he's trying to manipulate her throughout the relationship as well. And we try to unpack that with the kids as well. So we get them to sit through the entire documentary, watch the progress of their relationship, and see how it ends, which is obviously a very, very sad ending to it. And it can be very confronting because it does end up with pictures of Angela in hospital with pretty severe injuries and hooked up to tubes and life support and everything. So that end bit really hits a lot of students hard, and that really helps them turn a corner and open their eyes to the discussion we're having and how important it is to have that discussion, and how a relationship can seem very normal at first, but if you're unable to identify the signs of abuse or the early signs of abuse or the early signs of an unhealthy relationship, then it can spiral out of control quite quickly. So then we watch the video with them, and then we go through stage by stage and unpack we set out a timeline of their relationship, and we set out different points and talk about, well, was this point all right? Is this point all right? When did it start becoming an abusive relationship? When did it stop being a normal, healthy relationship? And as we go through, you can see a lot of the students' minds start to change, because maybe when they were watching the documentary, halfway through, they thought, oh, okay, this is still fine. But once they've seen the results of the situation, they're more accurately able to reflect on what happened throughout the relationship. So they can see incidents like Dale, the boyfriend, waiting outside Angela's work for, I think it was like something like 3 or 4 hours for her to finish, so that he could take her home and so that she didn't have anywhere to go afterwards. And initially the kids see that as pretty innocent. They think, oh, he's just being a loving boyfriend. He's just hanging out with her and just making sure she has a ride home or making sure she's safe. But once we understand that, once we see the ending of the story, that provides context to everything that happens prior. And then you can then see that those were the early signs of him starting to be controlling in that relationship, trying to control Angela at every turn and be the only person in her life. And then once she threatens to break up with him, that's when he first hits her for the first time. And that's a very confronting scene as well. And then a neighbor comes over to confront them over the noise that's been coming from their house, from the abuse, and even he gets abused as well. So it's a very violent story sometimes. But she still goes back. And their relationship continues. And then there's a few more warning signs before, unfortunately, the big incident that does end up leaving Angela hospitalized at the end. So it's a powerful story, and it can be confronting again. And sometimes for the students, maybe for some of them, if they have any kind of history with domestic violence, or if they're sensitive to that topic for whatever reason, then they can be a bit off-put by it. But for the most part, everyone buys into the story and they understand the severity of it. And now that they can really see those consequences firsthand, they can understand that those are the greater consequences of actions that would otherwise seem remedial that took place earlier in the relationship. I think that's about it. Yeah, so I think that's about it on the Angela Barker story. It's a fantastic story. Really opens their eyes to the subject and opens up the discussion well. Lara.
Thanks, Will. We also explore with the young people that physical and sexual abuse isn't the only type of abuse that happens. In Love Bite, we look at the cultural and spiritual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, stalking and intimidation, cyberbullying and harassment, and social abuse. So we look a bit more into it so they get an idea of what other types of abuse that can happen. So Will, do you want to talk a bit on consent? I think it's time to start wrapping up soon.
I think so, yeah. Sorry, I might have rambled a bit there. Yeah, so we talk about consent quite a lot as well. And obviously the kids, a big part of Love Bites as a whole is first trying to understand what their what their preconceptions are of a lot of the topics that we cover. So when we ask them what consent is, they kind of know they have a very vanilla understanding of it, which is just that, oh, it's just saying yes or no in the bedroom, but they don't understand the minutiae of the situation, the finer details of consent, and how broad that it's now become. And now that we've been talking about the topic quite a lot for the past maybe 20 years or so, it's really expanded in our understanding of it and how it works. So we talk about how you can't give consent if you're if you're underage, if you're under the age of consent. We explore the age of consent in all of the different states. We identify whatever state we're in and whatever state we're holding love bites in. Lara and I, it's only been New South Wales. We identify that the age of consent is 16. And then we talk with them about consent in relation to positions of power as well, and how you can't technically give consent to someone who is in a position of power over you, or sorry, that your consent could have been the product of manipulation or control. So a relationship with a teacher maybe, or with a parent or an uncle or an older family member, or an older religious figure, or any older person in your life that has any kind of position of power over you. And then we explore what consent means in that context, and how and why those dynamics aren't allowed. So then that allows us to reflect back onto the Angela Barker story, where obviously she's 14 and her partner's 18. We get to have a discussion about how initially they think, oh, that's all right, maybe that's normal, it's only a 4-year age difference. But then we start to ask them, why do you think there could be an imbalance there? And we start to identify the power imbalance in that relationship, and that Dale, the 18-year-old boyfriend, has physical power because he's a much bigger man than Angela. And he has emotional power as well because he's been around longer, he has more experience, he's probably smarter emotionally, I'd say. And he has that aura of just being an older person can be intimidating to a younger girl within that context. So then we use that as a platform to then explore what ages is it okay to date up to. Some people like to date up in relationships, and some people are attracted to older women or older men. But at what point does it become non-consensual? And trying to inform them, trying to make them more aware of these circumstances, so that when they're in them or when they come across them, they have a more open mind and they have a better understanding of how consent works under that context. I think that's about it on consent. But we have a fantastic clip that we show in relation to consent as well, which it's an absolute favorite of mine. I love it. And I know Lara does as well. It's a great clip, and it really, I'll let it do the talking. So whoever's got control of that will put that up.
Sure.
All right.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, "No thank you," then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please, that's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week, or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
Yeah, so that's pretty fun. It's a fun clip for the kids as well. There's certain moments throughout it they can laugh at, and it really it looks at the subject of consent in kind of a more lighthearted way because it's this fun animated cartoon. But obviously, they can all very much connect to the analogy that's being made with the relationship between the tea and consent to sex as well. They all get the message quite clearly afterwards as well, and it's a notable clip that we can tell really sticks with them. And that happened, and we can see that because once we get to the final stage of the program that Lara mentioned earlier, the creative stage, when they're writing their rap songs or doing their art, a lot of the time it does reference back to that tea clip, which shows that they really do connect to it, and that shows that they get quite an understanding of what the concept of consent is and how flexible it is. Yeah.